Welcome back to Bunters Yard. So today we are weathering this ECC Quarries hopper from Hornby. It's R6332, comes in a set of 3 if you're interested. And we did the British gas hopper from Daypole recently. I'll just put the link up the top there for you and in the description. And said it would be nice, rather than putting a load in or just weathering the inside, if we could see some bare steel coming through the inside, through the paintwork. So that's what we're going to do today. So the first thing we're going to need to do is to paint all the insides in this steel colour. This is Vallejo air. It's a metallic air, so it comes straight from the bottle. No need to mix. And we're just going to coat the inside in this. So no need to undercoat. You could do if you wanted to, but I'm not on this particular one. I'm just going to cover. It's quite good coverage with this steel metallic air. So that's straight onto the blue. It's already painted, so it keys in quite nicely. No need to worry too much about overspray. There's going to be a little bit of overspray around the edge because I'm not masking, but that just adds to the effect, because that. That's going to get chipped as well, where it's going to get loads hitting that and all sorts of things. So I'm taking a bit of care, but I'm not too fussed about that little bit of overspray at the top, around the top edge. Now once this is done and dry, we'll give it sort of 10 minutes to dry, and then we're going to coat it in a varnish, which is the Vallejo polyurethane matte varnish. And the reason for that is because we're going to do some extra layers on this in a minute. As you'll see, we need to kind of seal it in, otherwise the next wet layers could actually damage the silver finish we've put on here. So we'll let the varnish dry for half an hour or so, and then we're going to use this Asda's Essentials hairspray, and this is a chipping technique. You've probably seen this before with other videos on here where we do the same sort of thing. So we're going to just give the inside a spray. We'll let that dry for a few minutes, and then we'll give it a second coat. Now the thicker you lay this on, or the more coats you do, the different effects you're going to get. So once that's dry, we're going to use this. This again is a Vallejo air colour. This is French Navy, I think it's called. I'll put the link down in the description. Happens to match the this ECC Quarries pretty well. So it'll need a bit of a couple of coats probably, just to make sure it covers that silver properly. It's not essential because we're going to take a lot of it off anyway. I wasn't sure if the inside of these hoppers are actually painted. I couldn't find any pictures online sort of readily that shows me the inside of the hoppers. So they may have been just bare steel, or they could be painted grey or black, or they could be the body colour. But because the model's already in this body colour, I assume they may have done a bit of research, and I'm kind of taking Hornby's lead on this, but I'm not saying it's 100% correct. So that's our blue done. Now we've just left this dry for maybe 10 minutes. I've just cleaned the airbrush. I'm not taking a real lot of time. The longer you leave this, you're kind of going to get a different effect. So just sort of play about with it really. And we're just using plain water on a soft brush. We don't want it too wet. And then we're just going to brush the paint. And because we've used the hairspray, as soon as the paint gets wet, it goes through, and the hairspray sort of releases it from the layer below. And because we've sealed in the silver with the polyurethane varnish, that's hopefully going to stay in place. And it's just a matter of taking off as much of the blue paint as you want. We're going to leave it around these ribs, so it looks like where the anything that's been quarried, the loads and the cargoes, it's just chipped the paint away, and we've gone back to the bare metal. And it's just a matter of taking the time and going around and taking off as much of this paint as you need. Different brushes will give you different effects, so you may want to use a stiffer brush and go for a harsher effect, or you may want to take a bit more care and work out particular patterns and so on. But that's what we're going to do. We're just going to pop around on every panel, and we're going to take off as much of this paint as we feel is necessary. Just to clear some of the wetness away, I'm just using a tissue just to dab it back. Try not to take any more of the blue paint off than needed. And we're going to weather this a bit later on, so the effect is going to change a little bit and be a bit more subtle, hopefully. I'm just cleaning up as much as I can of the blue that we don't need. Just don't want the edges to be too neat, and they need to be a bit ragged where the rocks and the ore loads that have gone into this have damaged the paintwork. So we'll leave the inside of the hopper for now, and we're going to concentrate on the outside. I've looked at a few of these online. These are never going to be really heavily weathered. They just seem to be at the worst sort of dusty. So that's what we're going to do with this. And we're using again vallejo air. This is sand colour. It's just a kind of dusty colour that I kind of like. I find quite useful. Spray it on very lightly, and then we're going to brush it back. So we've got a really soft brush. This is one of the brushes from the resins that I use, but it's a real nice soft brush. I've just damped it in water, really only very, very slightly damp, and then we just brush down. It will just give us these kind of streaks to simulate where the wagon's been covered in dust and then it's rained. And then we'll do the same on the ends as well. It's a bit more tricky on the end because of the sort of access to it, but Again, just cover it in a little bit of sand coloured dust. And again with our brush, which is ever so slightly damp, we'll just start to brush it down to create those rain streaks. It's a bit tricky inside because of that handrail. So there we go. We'll do the same on the other side as well. Yeah, if you're modelling a different type of hopper, something that maybe takes coal or iron ore, you might want to use different colours. So coal, you're obviously going to use a black or a very dark colour, and if it's iron ore, maybe you're going to use red, sort of one of the red colours, because the dust and the fallout would be a different colour to this. It wouldn't be this colour. And we need to just do a bit underneath there as well. Now they're not going to get cleaned by anybody or by the weather, so they're going to be a bit thicker. So we just need to get a bit of paint in there, and we'll do all the both ends. And then just to soften up the inside, we may as well add some of the dust from the lows that would have been there, so the same sort of fallout would be on the inside as well. Now if you see with the airbrush, if you take the nozzle off, that little guard on the end, turn the pressure down and get really close, you can do these fine lines, and that's what we're going to do, get fairly close. It takes a bit of practice, so practice on paper first before you try it on your model. And even now I'll sort of go over the top and get it wrong, but yeah, we're just going to do these really thin lines, and these are just kind of highlights of runs down the side of the paintwork. And if they're a little bit too thick, or if you just want to add another feature in, a very, very damp brush while it's still fairly fresh paint, and then we can just pull that down, drag that down, and make some different streaks. There we go. On the pictures that we've seen, is that they're still quite clean. When these were around in the sort of 90s, they were quite good condition, so they just seem to get a bit of grime on the lower portions of this. Obviously underneath was going to be a bit grotty, so we'll paint that in this dark earth, and literally just going to do the bottom of those where the axles would sit. Now the ends are going to be a little bit dirtier. They wouldn't get any sort of, they don't get much weathering down there, so the rain wouldn't wash that off as much, and it's not going to get any sort of traffic and people passing by. So we'll paint that in a little bit heavier. And then the same on the other side, just a small amount on those bottom of those axle housings, bearings, I guess that's what they are. And then once more at the other end as well. While I've got the wheels off, I took them off camera just a moment ago. While they're off, we'll give them a paint up as well, the same dirt, and we're going to use some weathering powders a bit later on, just to enhance that effect a little bit more. And then I thought these walkways could do with something So I've just used the same colour, this dark earth, and we'll just quickly give them a light line of that, and then we'll brush it off just to reveal that detail of that sort of checker plate walkway. Okay, yeah, my favourite bit, as you know, weathering powders, Humbrol dark earth, so again, we're not going to go too heavy on this. We're just doing the bottom of these axle housings, or whatever they're. I'm sure they've got a real name, and that's probably not it. Please tell me if you know what they're really called. But yeah, where the bearings are. So we're just going to add a little bit there, and then on this sort of this horizontal surface where there's going to be fallout, and you're going to get mud and grime from the track, and you're going to get a little bit of it falling out there. So we'll just put a touch of weathering powder on there, really not too much. Don't want to go too mad with this. The end here, this kind of ties it all together. This is why it's kind of my favourite bit, because it seems to justify everything. Right at the end you think, oh, maybe it doesn't look quite right, but once you get the powders on and it pulls everything together, I think it makes a whole lot of difference. I'm not introducing any rust tones into this because I think they was as again, all the pictures I've seen, they all looked quite well looked after. I'm sure there are some horrendous versions out there, but yeah, I've just gone. This is the look I've gone for today on this one, and the other two. There's a set of three, let's say. So I've done all three, and yeah, they're all the same. Okay, now inside as well. We're going to add some powders inside, because dirt and the grime would get caught around those ribs and around the bottom there. So there's going to be bits of old, cargoes that are going to be knocking around, and bits are going to get caught around those, around the joins. So we just dab that in there quite fairly liberally, but not too mad. I just want to get it in those joins. It just enhances those, just sort of highlights them a little bit more. Again, if you're modelling a different hopper that's carried a different load, you may want to use different colours in there. If it's an older model, then you may want to introduce rust tones as well, because it will get rusty where the metal has been bared. Not sure if these are made. I guess these are made of steel, so they would get rusty at some point. And now the wheels have dried. We're just going to add some powder onto those. Just the same dark earth Humbrol, so to kind of keep it all the same. And then we are going to seal it all in using our vallejo matte varnish. This is mixed 50-50 in the airbrush. And we're going to give everything a coat or two of this. So we'll give it one coat. I'll give it two passes with this first wet coat, and then I'll give it another coat a bit later on today. Normally leave it 3 or 4 hours and it will fully dry. We're doing the inside as well, and that seals all the powders, ties it all together. There's a second part of that while it's still wet. We can do that. And then on the wheels, and then we'll just pop those in once it's dried. I've also painted the coupling hooks off camera because they just need to not be black, so we need a bit of weathering on there. And then this final bit is just a little bit of axle grease on the ends of the buffers, and that's it, pretty much done. Thanks for watching. If you're not subscribed, please do that, but otherwise we'll see you again very soon.